Always like to come to you to talk about Bitcoin. Certainly significant gains that we've seen trading right now well above 41,000. You saw that note out from JPM earlier this week talking about Bitcoin hitting 146,000. Has your thesis changed at all given the significant surge that we have seen over the last several weeks?
I think that the price move in Bitcoin actually is pretty textbook because it's behaving the way crypto and Bitcoin has acted after previous halvenings, when the block reward's cut in half. And 2017 was a year when Bitcoin last went parabolic. That's one full year after the halvening. 2021 would pattern itself after that. So if the fact that Bitcoin's doubled almost in 10 days, and I think the JP Morgan numbers are not that far off. I mean, I'm not sure I'd be that precise with 146,000, but I think Bitcoin, if it looks like 2017, will be up at least 300% this year.
It does seem like an oddly precise price target there too, huh? I mean, you guys had 40,000. We're already above that now. You said that it could quadruple. That would put it above 100,000 here at some point in 2021. So I mean, continue that trend. We've talked about volatility in Bitcoin and how quickly it can move south here. So I mean, obviously, it's not expected to be a straight up into the right chart, or is it? Maybe how should investors be looking at it?
Yeah, it's a hyper volatile asset. Again, I just would point out the future's uncertain, but our roadmap for risk assets this year is that stocks would be pretty explosive out of the gate and peak in sometime either in late January, but as late as April around S&P 4,000 before a big drawdown happens. I think Bitcoin is going to, if the S&P falls 10%, Bitcoin is going to have a huge drawdown. It could be down 40, 50%. So I don't think it's straight up with a ruler. It's going to be pretty jagged, but I think at the end of the year, Bitcoin is much higher.
Did you say it could be down as much as 40%?
Yes, but that's a pretty typical correction for crypto. In fact, I think last year it had a couple of drawdowns nearly that size. So that's what you get with a permissionless blockchain and experiencing hyper growth and adoption.
I mean, you talk about kind of this risk, the trigger that we're expected to see in the first half of 2021 that could spark this correction. A lot of people were wondering if that was going to be, the outcome of the Democratic wins in Georgia. It doesn't seem to be based on the market reaction we're seeing play out now. So when you look ahead, I guess our attention turns back to kind of the vaccine rollout. You have your eyes on Israel to see how things are going over there. But what's kind of your next judgment of what could trigger maybe that correction you see on the horizon and what investors should be watching now?
Yeah, I mean, well, foremost, it was never our view that the Senate race would have any impact on markets. I think it's that's someone's, imaginary shouting at the market to do something. So I think that if there's something that's going to scare markets, it's kind of what you said. It would be the risk that the pandemic looks like we're losing ground. I mean, right now there's millions of people getting vaccinated, and hopefully that leads to a slowdown in infections. That's why we're watching Israel closely, because Israel is the furthest along with percentage of the population. And, so presumably if cases start to slow, that's good. But if they don't, I don't know. I think that would be very worrisome. The other thing is, the yield curve, which has really great predictive power on what the PMIs will do. The yield curve is saying that PMIs are potentially going to be peaking this month in January and then fall through May. And I think that move towards 50 on the ISMs could make people think we're heading towards a recession. And that could be a reason for stocks to sell off. But, the market's unpredictable. But again, I just want to be clear. Nobody at Fundstrat thought the Senate race would have any bearing on markets, even if people were sitting on cash. In fact, I would counter trade that and say that's one reason we thought that markets would be explosive out of the gates.
Tom, I want to follow up on that point you just made about the virus itself and the spread, that if in fact it felt like we're sort of losing control. I mean, you could argue, if we're following sort of what the health community is saying, this is about the worst that we're seeing in terms of the surge, things likely to get worse at a time when there are some signs that the vaccine rollout may not happen as rapidly as we initially thought. How are you following the numbers here in the U.S. and has the outlook on that front changed for you at all when you look at how slow the inoculations have actually gone in the first month of this vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, CDC is releasing the data daily, and our data science team is pulling that data, and so we have a good real-time snapshot. It comes out at 9 a.m. every day. I actually think the vaccinations are ramping up pretty dramatically. I mean, yesterday they were 30% above the day before, and the pace is around 500,000 now. It's probably going to hit 1 million next week, and that would get to roughly 30% of Americans being vaccinated by April. And that's also when the winter kind of ends and COVID hopefully is retreating. So I think, it's a mistake to think that out of the gates, if the vaccines are choppy now, and that's a lot of it's state implementation, it's going to look like that in April. I'm sure it's going to ramp up. Look what happened with testing in the US. I mean, now the US has carpet bombed with testing, and in the beginning it was slow. So I'm not that worried about it. But yeah, if COVID mutates or if the vaccine doesn't work, that would be very worrisome.
Tom Lee, always good to get your perspective here on the show. Funstrat Global Advisors, Managing Partner and Head of Research.